These are the most painful Disneyland deaths ever. On the afternoon of August 21st, 1967, 15-year-old Ricky Lee Yama entered Disneyland with two friends. Tomorrowland was buzzing that summer with its newest attraction, the PeopleMover, an open-air tram that ran 2 miles an hour floating above the crowds. It was slow, quiet, and efficient, but it had no doors or seatbelts. As they rode over Tomorrowland Terrace, a live soul concert played below. They decided they wanted a better view. Inside one of the ride's tunnels, they tried jumping between cars despite posted warnings. The tunnel was dim, and the space between each car was barely 18 inches. One friend made it across, then another, then came Ricky. But his foot slipped. He falls onto the track and tries to push himself up, but the next car is already coming. The wheels caught him, legs first, pulling him under, fracturing his bones and collapsing his chest within seconds. It dragged him across the concrete before the system slammed to a stop. Passengers screamed as the light came on. Cast members rushed in, halting the ride and clearing the tunnel. The coroner ruled it an accidental death. No drugs, no alcohol or operator fault were found. Disneyland later raised the PeopleMover's guardrails and later enclosed the cars completely in the early 1970s. It's past midnight in Anaheim. Fireworks boast over the park, but outside the gates, 19-year-old Thomas Guy Cleveland climbs the fence, chasing $5 worth of free admission and a bad idea. June 17, 1966. Thomas found a quiet spot near the employee parking lot, right under the monorail track. The monorail was a futuristic train that glided 20 feet above the ground, carrying guests from the Disneyland Hotel into Tomorrowland. He climbed over the first fence easily. The second fence proved to be harder, standing 16 feet high, laced with barbed wire. As if you know, it was meant to keep people out. Thomas climbs anyway, cutting his hands, pulling himself over until his feet land on concrete. The narrow maintenance path that runs under the monorail. He starts walking along the track, moving quietly, planning to drop into the park unseen. But there was one huge problem. The monorail train was coming. Security saw him and started yelling for him to get down. The train driver, Dallas Barker, couldn't hear them over the noise and was probably thinking about clocking out. The train, moving at 25 miles per hour, speeded towards Thomas. He panicked and decided to lie flat on the ledge, assuming the train would glide right over him. It passed over him, and security helped him down, is what I would be saying if the gap between the ledge and the train was bigger, but sadly it wasn't. The monorail hit him instantly and dragged him for several yards before stopping. He died at the scene. The park quickly called the police and the scene was shut down. The operator couldn't have seen him in time, and investigators ruled it a tragic accident caused by trespassing. It was a clear Christmas Eve morning at Disneyland in 1998. The park was full, the weather mild, the air heavy with carols and popcorn. 33-year-old Vietnam refugee turned Microsoft programmer Luan V. Dawson stood near the rivers of America with his wife Liu Tui Vong and their 2 sons. At near noon, the family lined up for the Columbia sailing ship, a calm boat ride that circled the river. A new crew member grabbed the mooring line and threw it toward the dock, where it hooked onto a metal cleat bolted to the wooden platform. What she didn't know was that the cleat's bolts were corroded and the wood beneath was rotting. When the ship drifted forward, the rope snapped tight. The weakened bolts tore loose, and the 10-pound cleat ripped from the dock like a projectile. It struck Luan in the head. The impact shattered his skull and ruptured an artery. His wife was also hit and thrown to the ground. Their children, standing beside them, watched everything happen. Guests screamed, blood hit the boards, Christmas music kept playing. Paramedics arrived within minutes. Luan was airlifted to UCI Medical Center, but the trauma was irreversible. He never regained consciousness and was declared brain dead by the next day. His wife survived after several surgeries. Disneyland was fined and quietly overhauled its ride maintenance policies. Liu sued the park for negligence. The case settled out of court for a reported $20 million, used partly to create a scholarship for Vietnamese American engineering students as a tribute to the Luan. On a mild winter afternoon in 1984, 48-year-old Dolly Regina Young walked through Disneyland with 5 of her friends. The group decided to end their visit with a ride on the Matterhorn bobsleds, one of the park's original thrill attractions. They boarded in the afternoon. Dolly, the smallest of the group, sat alone in the back seat of their sled. The operator lowered the lap belt, which was a simple strap with no harness and doors, then gave the routine thumbs up. The car rolled forward, chains clanking as it climbed into the artificial mountain. But at the Glacier Grotto tunnel, the belt that should have kept her secured either came loose or unfastened. Dolly fell backward from the sled, landing hard on the adjacent track. For about 30 seconds she lay there, dazed, breathing, trying to move. Then another bobsled came through the same curve. The riders saw a shape on the track and thought it was part of the scenery. It wasn't. The 1,200-pound vehicle hit Dolly head-on, slicing her neck and passing clean through. Police and ride engineers inspected the sled and found no mechanical failure. Whether Dolly had stood, adjusted her seatbelt, or the buckle slipped under pressure was never proven. The Matterhorn reopened the next morning after a short closure, officially labeled a tragic accident. Her husband later filed a wrongful death lawsuit, claiming operator negligence. It ended in a confidential settlement. Disney quietly replaced the old friction belts with sturdier automotive buckles the following year. Since then, the curve where she fell has earned the nickname Dolly's Dip. September 22, 2000. Families were scattered across Mickey's Toontown, where everything looked like it came straight out of a cartoon. For 4-year-old Brandon Zucker, it was supposed to be a perfect night, celebrating his mother's birthday and enjoying the rides. But then came Roger Rabbit's Cartoon Spin, a spinning dark ride where guests rode open taxis through painted cityscapes tunnels. When the operator pulled down the lap bar for Brandon, it didn't click into place. The operator noticed but sent the cab off anyway. Moments after the ride began, the cab started spinning. Brandon slid sideways under the loose bar to grab something he dropped. The movement pulled him out of the seat, and in a single motion he fell onto the concrete track. Before anyone could react, the next taxi came around the bend and struck him. His mother screamed, "He's under the car!" and his father jumped out of the moving vehicle and ran towards the control booth, shouting for them to stop the ride. It took nearly 10 minutes for crews to lift the 1-ton cab off his body. By then his chest had collapsed, his diaphragm was torn, and his spine was broken. Paramedics managed to bring him back, but the oxygen loss left him blind, paralyzed, and unable to speak. For 9 years, he lived in a near vegetative state, dependent on machines. He died on January 26, 2009, his body finally giving out from the injuries he suffered that night. The investigation blamed human error. Disney was fined $25,000 and later added doors, sensors, and faster emergency systems to every car. It was the summer of 1974 in Anaheim, California. A brand new attraction had just opened in Tomorrowland, America Sings. It's basically a bunch of animatronic animals singing patriotic songs while the audience spins around them like a rotisserie. Among the cast that night was 18-year-old Deborah Gale Stone, a recent high school graduate, a cheerleader, and 9 days into the job. She was stationed at Theater 3, greeting each wave of guests with a smile. By late night, Debbie wrapped up her last audience of the night as the room dimmed and the seats began their slow rotation to reset for the next group. But as the platform began to move, she's standing just a little too close to the wall, just a few inches, nothing anyone would notice. The moving segment kept pushing, a slow, steady grind that compressed her chest until she could no longer breathe. Her lungs collapsed under the pressure, her bones started to splinter. No alarms went off, no sensors stopped the machinery. Guests in the next theater realized something was wrong when they heard screaming through the panels. A man in the audience ran toward the control booth, pounding on the glass and shouting for the operator to stop the ride. It took 12 seconds for the system to halt. By then, she'd already been crushed, her chest and abdomen fatally compressed. Paramedics showed up, but there's nothing they can do. The ride shuts down for 2 days. Disney adds some safety sensors, new rules, 2 operators per shift, all things they realized they should have had yesterday. Disney also quietly settled with Debbie's parents, who later created a scholarship in her name. She had taken the job to help pay for her college. 9 days in, she became Disneyland's first employee to die on the job.